Our story begins in ancient Egypt. During this time, the Hebrew people were slaves to the Egyptians, and a Hebrew boy was born to his family and ended up being adopted by Pharaoh's daughter, an Egyptian princess. His name was Moses, and he lived a life of relative ease and favor until one day as a young man, he witnessed an Egyptian taskmaster beating a Hebrew slave. And identifying with him as a Hebrew, he killed the Egyptian and ended up fleeing Egypt. He later settled in the land of Midian and began a new life as a shepherd there. During his years in Midian, the Egyptians continued to oppress the Hebrew people, and the Hebrews cried out to God, and he heard them and remembered the covenant that he had made with them and with their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
So back in Midian, Moses was taking care of his father-in-law's flock. One day while tending to the flock, he approached a place called Horeb, also known as the Mountain of God. And as he approached, an angel of the Lord appeared to him, and he appeared in the form of a bush. The bush was on fire, but it wasn't consumed by the flames. Inside of the bush, God speaks to Moses. He says, "Moses, Moses." And Moses replies, "Here I am." God then tells Moses to keep his distance and to take his sandals off because the ground that he's on is holy ground. And he also tells him that he is the God of his father and of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And Moses becomes so frightened that he hides his face, afraid to look upon God. But God also informs him of a plan that he has, a plan of deliverance for his people in Egypt. He's heard their cries. He's seen the bondage and the slavery, and he's going to deliver them. And he tells Moses that he has a plan for Moses to be a big part in that. Moses is going to go back to Egypt, and he's going to speak to Pharaoh, and he's going to let Pharaoh know of God's plan to take his people out of bondage and into a land that he's promised to them.
Moses replies with doubt and first says, "Lord, but why would you send me?" And the Lord just says, "I will be with you." And then he says, "Who do I tell them has sent me?" And he says, "Tell them that I am has sent you." Moses next says, "How will they even know that you appeared to me? How can I convince them of that?" And God gives him three miraculous signs that he can perform as proof. Next, Moses points out that he's not a great speaker and worries that he won't be eloquent enough to say what needs to be said. And God reminds him that he created his mouth and that he will be with him in that as well. And finally, Moses asks him, "Lord, please just send someone else." And the Lord says, "I will give you Aaron, your brother, to go along with you, and I'll be with you both as you go."
And also during this conversation, God lets Moses know that Pharaoh is not going to initially agree to the terms of his demands. But he also promises Moses that he will give him his mighty, strong, outreached hand to help in the matter. He'll afflict the Egyptians with any number of circumstances until the king finally relents and gives in to the demand of letting his people go. So Moses obeys. He leaves Midian. He returns to Egypt, back to the land of captivity and bondage for his people. And he leads his people out of Egypt into the land that God has promised them.